Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Noxcast, your weekly news recap podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Hope. I'm the managing executive editor.
And I'm Chloe Erno, the news editor, and this week we're joined by Ryan Pacheco, our senior reporter.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for coming on. I just wanted to start us off. For those who don't know, Ryan was our first ever guest in this wonderful series that we've started here. But I wanted to let you just talk, for those who don't know, about your position, senior reporter, and sort of what you do for us on a weekly basis.
So, senior reporter, we take on the role, and I'm not the only senior reporter. We have a couple other ones that are either working on the writing side of things or working in the photography side of things. But basically, what the job is to take on a little bit more of the sort of workload that maybe people that just write once a week or twice a week might not do, or also kind of go into the sort of tougher stories that might require a little bit more elbow grease to get going. So that's something that I live and breathe. I don't think you guys have had me out of your hair once since I started here, so it was perfect for me, and I've been loving every minute of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many positive things to say about all the contributions you make, but, you've also played a role at times in, assisting other staffers who might need help with certain stories and things like that, which has been very much appreciated, but, due to, or in part, because of, all the fantastic work you've done for us as senior reporter, you were able to land an internship at the Brattleboro Reformer, which is really exciting, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely, and the way that I actually got that position was kind of by doing a lot of the things that, some of our journalism professors always push us towards. I met the person that I'm working with, the Reformer, while doing what's called vote stringing for the Associated Press. That's when you actually call in the vote totals. That was something that one of our journalism professors, Dr. Lawfer, had pitched us as a class that we should take that opportunity. And that's where I actually met the reporter who, a year later, I reached out to and said, hey, I remember you had mentioned that you guys like to help out journalism students, and I'm looking for an internship. So that was one of those ways that doing those sort of things can actually translate into, better opportunities down the line. And since then, I've been basically splitting my time between Keene and Brattleboro. My car is getting a lot more mileage on it than it ever has in the last 3 years. And I'm, like I said, loving every minute of it.
Certainly, it was well deserved, and also I'm someone who did do that string in the past. It's a nice little experience. It's nice to feel like you're sort of contributing positively and getting information out there in terms of vote totals and stuff. So I recommend that too. If anyone who's watching ever gets the opportunity or gets reached out about that, look into it. It's a good time. But yeah, I'm really happy for you. The only thing that's a little bit hard is that you have to take a little bit less on for us, but we can work with it. We have a lot of wonderful staff, fortunately, who can fill in gaps. When previously we had lower staff numbers, so all the power to you, and I'm very happy. But this past week, for the Equinox, you did an article about a Faculty Research Roundtable, which involved Professors John Sturtz and Margaret Henning, and they were talking about their experience with the Fulbright program, scholarship program there. If you want to just talk about your reporting on that.
Yeah, and it was really great because these are people that are in two different fields. One is in the health field, the other is in, I believe, political science. And the tying theme that brought them together was that they both had these opportunities as Fulbright recipients to really spread their wings and go out and do some really amazing things. But also, these faculty research roundtables gave them the opportunity to actually come and talk about it with the campus community, their colleagues, the student community. There wasn't much of that there this time, but it's open to everybody. So if you want to come out and see just the quality of work that our Keene State professors are putting in, this is a great way to come out and kind of see who it is that you're learning from, which I think is really inspiring. It makes me feel a lot more proud to be somebody that has the opportunity to learn here. I I definitely think that it really is an important thing to have the chance to hear from, our professors, or just learn about the work that they're doing and see what it is that they have been putting up. And these kind of things are going to be happening kind of throughout the year. Darrell Hucks, who sort of organizes the events, said that the next one's going to be on October 10th, by the way.
Cool. Yeah, I've said on the show before that I'm very appreciative of the sort of mix of events that we have at Keene State, including some of the more like academic focused and events where faculty get to showcase some of the work that they've done in the past. That, and like we had like the book reading series, The Keene is Curious. That was pretty cool too. So this is just like another opportunity to where we can have all different sort of constituent groups of the campus community interact in different ways. So yeah, very cool stuff. And we appreciate you pulling through for that. I know that wasn't like something you took initially, because it was kind of like a light week for you over here, but we were very grateful for it, and it was good coverage. But in terms of getting into our regular recap, I wanted to start off here with news with our top story there, which was Administrative Executive Editor Tim's coverage of the Keene International Festival, which happened on Saturday, September 27th. And it was a nice little event where different restaurants representing different cultural cuisine and different, there was some students there, international students there. There was some folks who were just sort of showing off like art and different like jewelry and like creations that things that come from their culture, and sort of it's just a beautiful showcase of all things international, and it's a really good time. I've been there in the past because of my job. We also we participate in it, so I've been over there a few times in the years past. It's very vibrant. It's right in it's right here in Keene, obviously, but this was another instance where Tim pulled through pretty hard, because initially we didn't have anyone down for like the photos or the story, but he was able to take on both, and it was really nice visuals, and also really sort of captured the breadth of the event, I think. So yeah, I think it was really cool.
I'm so glad that Tim pulled through with that. It was great coverage too. The photos turned out incredible, and I think it really captured the spirit of the event. It captured so many different performers in their full outfits for the different performances they were doing. You had people singing, you had people posing for the camera, and it was just very lively and very happy. And I think the coverage was great as well. There are multiple members of our Global Cultural Club who put in some of their 2 cents about the event. 2 different performers were interviewed, and it was just overall really solid coverage by Tim.
Absolutely. Anything that Tim does, it's going to be. And it's great that he was able to jump in on this at the last second, too, because that's one of the challenges with, big events like this. Something happens, and, there's always going to be somebody that's going to be able to pick it up and kind of come through for us at the last second. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that a big part of what we do is definitely sort of filling in gaps when, the Keene Sentinel staff might not be able to either attend, or, in certain ways, they might not be able to have an article and they only might be able to have photos and things like that. I think with event coverage in particular, I know that the Sentinel has like the Extending Life to the Fullest or ELF magazine that they also do more like event and like arts coverage in. But I think, by virtue of, having the staff that we do, a lot of the times it's more surefire that we can get a full article and photos for some of the events that go on, which it does a lot, I think, to sort of act as that, backup in terms of like, it's never like a certain thing, if people at one outlet can cover one thing, but I think there's a lot of like, it's not as much of like a fierce competition anymore among it's very much like trying to help each other out and realize that we're all trying to do the same job here as media. So I think, I'm pretty proud of when we can do event coverage in like the broader Keene community, but that still has that tie to campus with, the aspect of including students and things like that. So, yeah, great stuff. Moving on to our top story in region and state this week. This was a piece from Anne Marie Timmons at New Hampshire Public Radio, and this was about the FAFSA form, or the free application for federal student aid, I believe is the acronym there, but talking about how it's now available for New Hampshire students and how the process is actually easier than it was last year. I know there was a lot of drama and, like, I guess, setbacks with the rollout of the new FAFSA form last year. There was sort of a lot of communication from the government, Department of Ed at the time, that said it would be much faster, and then people ran into issues, and then it created a backlog, and they had to set back the deadline in terms of, like, when it was actually going to be released or when information was going to come out, and it was this whole thing. But now it seems like they have a better grip of something in terms of FAFSA now, so that's good to see. It kind of, in this article, it goes over why you should apply for FAFSA even if you don't think you'll get aid, sort of the importance of doing that, as well as what to expect when filling it out. So this is a nice, good, like, informational piece that I wanted to highlight because, being like a college publication, so many students utilize FAFSA. It's like probably in the 95% and up in terms of that. So I feel like, it's a great piece to check out and sort of get the help that you need in terms of what you got to fill out financially.
And I'm just glad to see something that makes it easier for college students. I feel like recently, with everything we've seen, it's just making everything harder in public education with the cuts of federal funding, with what's happening with TRIO right now and them being in danger. So I think it's just nice to make it easier for people to be able to acquire the FAFSA and to go through the process of filling it out. I remember last year that it was definitely a bit of a struggle to get it through, but we managed, and I think it's just nice to make it easier on college students who definitely need it and who have all these other pushbacks being thrown at them right now.
And yeah, can't agree more, especially with just how much of a pain it can be. I can't remember one time I actually filled out the FAFSA where I didn't feel like I needed an Advil afterwards. So anything that we can do that just helps people understand the process a little bit easier, that's kind of part of our mission statement right there. So I was glad that we were able to get that piece in there.
Yeah, definitely. And great work by NHPR. I think we also had a good mix of other stories in region this week. So definitely go check it out on our website or in a paper near you. In terms of the top story in student life, we highlighted the chess club, which was a piece done by our staffer, Serena Taylor, and photos taken by our social media director, Elena. This was one that I definitely think we've been thinking about for quite some time in terms of pursuing, even back when I was like news editor and was still supervising the student life section, like on an interim basis. I remember thinking about it. The chess club, they meet at the same time as like we meet as an e-board at the Equinox, and so they're in the room over, and they could be pretty rowdy at times in a positive way. We overhear them sort of while they're playing, and it gets seemingly kind of intense in a fun, playful manner. So we were kind of intrigued by that, and also it's like interesting to see a club that you wouldn't typically think of. Like, this is a really, upbeat and very, like, interactive and, super fun environment. People think of chess and they think of probably, like, older people playing, and it's, in the basement of what it's like. Now, this is very, they have a lot of engaged members, I think. And so it was cool to have Serena look into it a little bit more and get the perspective of both e-board and general members into why they joined and to what they sort of get out of this experience. And to sort of, I also appreciate Elena getting the photos for this because, while we were going through the budget and then Justin mentioned that, it was like, probably the best option is if you could just go over to the other room right now, just sort of grab those because they meet on Mondays. So it would either be then or the following week. So definitely good stuff all around. We love to highlight our student groups.
And I think it's impossible not to be a bit curious when we just see them across the hall every single week. And we can hear it through the walls that it does get very intense. And it was just a joy to actually get that coverage. Because we've always been wondering, like, what actually is happening over there? Like, that seems fun to cover. And I think that we got that story. And it's just hard because it's at the same time that we have our meetings. But to get that coverage and to actually see what the chess club is doing is just incredible.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous that I didn't get to cover that myself. I've always wanted to see what goes on behind those doors, but it's always fun, no matter what it is, to highlight just any of the clubs that we have on campus, because there is such a diversity and there is something for everybody of any interest that you can get yourself involved with here. I mean, I know for a fact that I would have loved to have learned to play that game at one point, so that would have been one of the other things that I was doing if I wasn't where I am now. So, but that's just one club, and there's so many different. What was it that we were hearing about the other day? There was a what was it, like a fencing club that's also going on here, and
Yep.
we also have an art collective, and there really is just a space for everybody here. So, every chance that we can to shed light on what that is, can't be more grateful for it.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I was glad to get that perspective too, because it's also interesting that the chess club doesn't have like a massive social media presence like other clubs do, or massive in terms of like relative to our campus's size. But they're still pretty mighty in terms of their numbers. So, clearly there's, that interest there, and it's sort of talked about in the article also. The president talks about restarting the club after like a period of, uncertainty about leadership and stuff. So, I appreciate, whenever we can get those stories about like people making sure that these spaces that previously had a lot of people could continue even through like hard times, specifically looking at the pandemic still, and stuff like that. So really interesting story. But now we're going to move on to our editorial this week, which was about some of the changing recommendations from the CDC in relation to vaccines and sort of changing, which groups that they recommend the newest COVID shot for, and sort of other things relating to like the childhood vaccine schedule, stuff like that. We sort of were talking about this from the perspective of at a time with a lot of federal uncertainty in the health departments. What can Keene State really do in terms of being that voice of like education and like leadership, and I guess, spreading awareness about certain topics, specifically relating to health education and, the benefits of getting vaccines, and what information can be sent out, or how can we make sure that students know that despite the lack of clear and concise information from the federal government relating to them, that these things are still safe and effective. It's sort of a moment where, when the federal government is kind of faltering in that regard, that you need to look at these more local forms of government and institutions to sort of provide that guidance instead. And so we're also not really seeing that level of leadership from like the state level. What we've been seeing is that there is a northeastern sort of compact of states who are trying to draft up their own vaccine guidelines and recommendations to fill in that gap. So that includes like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, all of New England except for New Hampshire. So it's kind of disappointing in that regard. And we sort of talk about, given sort of also a lack of leadership in the health realm from the state, now we're kind of looking at college level. What can the college do, given they have a wellness center? They, operate vaccine clinics on campus. What can be done to sort of make sure that people still know what they need to know about these critical things?
Yeah, and I think that we definitely need to be on top of stuff like this. We've seen other states come out where they're not mandating that people get polio vaccines or measles vaccines. And it's very important to advocate to the students to keep up the safety regulations and to make sure that we're a safe and a healthy campus. I know it was brought up during the budget meeting, but I think the Stall Street Journal was such a great thing as well. Just getting it out there in simple places that students can see it is such a great way to just let them know what to do, especially as we go into the winter semester and the temperatures are dropping substantially. I think it's good to make sure that people are aware that we still need to take care of ourselves and each other, and it's for the best of our campus that we get these flu shots, that we get vaccinated, that we stay safe.
And keywords still. I think I was trying to bring this up at the meeting the other night too, but I kind of think it's unfortunate how this, at least from my perspective, seems to be happening at a time where maybe stuff about vaccines and COVID and the flu isn't quite, or doesn't feel like it's as quite present in the public consciousness as it was maybe a couple years ago. I know that it does not feel like we're thinking and talking about it as much anymore, so anything that the school can be doing to take on that leadership role and sort of fill in that gap and make sure that information's getting out to us, I think that's really important, especially during a time when we might not be looking as hard as we used to anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unprecedented in terms of where we are at with the conversation surrounding health right now. I think there's just so much uncertainty and concern about, where we look to consistently get that level of information. I kind of expressed during the editorial discussion sort of my disappointment in seeing historical accounts of when, the polio vaccine first came out and there was, parties in the streets and everybody was cheering and it was such a celebratory moment and everybody recognized the creator of that vaccine as one of the greatest scientists of all time, and sort of it was not really a political issue. And again, it's a thing that has become increasingly politicized, unfortunately, and it really shouldn't be, because I think one of the government's top priorities should be, protecting its populace in terms of their health and well-being. And so now we're kind of seeing a pair back of that, which is, how we mentioned in the editorial, kind of ironic considering that paired with the rhetoric from Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., talking about, removing some of those recommendations and certain regulations and things like that, and the Make America Healthy Again initiative. And then we're looking at that compared to sort of shifting recommendations, which a lot of health experts still say, you're not really going with that motto as much anymore.
Yeah, and it's such a mess right now with everything that we're seeing. We have our president saying that Tylenol causes autism, and I think it's important to educate people that the things that we're hearing from some of our politicians aren't correct. Most of these people are not scientists, they're not health experts, they don't have any precedents to be speaking on these issues, and they're just spreading misinformation that is going to harm people in the long run. And I don't think vaccines should be a political statement or political issue. It's just about people's safety and their well-being. It shouldn't be us versus them. It should be everyone getting vaccinated for their own safety.
And I don't even think that it ever was I could be completely wrong here, but I don't remember it ever being a political issue like it was before all of this happened. And I think that's incredibly sad because, like you just mentioned, Nate, when people were, celebrating that we had a vaccine for polio and we were hailing the creators of that vaccine a hero, I feel like we have such a short public memory now that we forget what it felt like in the early months of the pandemic when everything was closed down, when nobody knew what was going to happen, we were all terrified. How much we were praying and hoping for the day when we'd be able to put this all to bed and we'd be able to go outside and feel safe again because there was something there to save us. And it didn't even take a few years for us to get to that point and then say, oh, well, instead we're just going to argue and complain over this. So I think that's just a really sad state for us to be in, especially because another thing that I think that we've forgotten that was always talked about at the height of this was that this is the pandemic we're dealing with now. It's not going to be the last one. It makes me really wonder what we're going to do the next time this happens, and I don't think we're going to be as lucky.
Right, yeah, definitely. And, I think speaking on a more, positive note, I guess, is that I can tell you that we're here to, play our role in educating the public. And I feel like we release at least a couple stories every semester about, staying safe from sickness and what you can do to sort of make sure that you're keeping healthy. Oftentimes when coming back into college life, especially at the start of the semesters, a lot of sickness goes around just by virtue of people coming from all sorts of places and then congregating into one, big shared space. So we often publish stories about sort of the steps that you can take, and we want to make sure that we can talk to on-campus health experts about what you can do. Again, because we sort of have that responsibility as well to some degree, being members of the media to play that role. So we're happy to continue coverage surrounding health issues and stuff like that. So there's always that. But moving on to a nice little profile story here in arts and entertainment, our top story was about Junior Elijah Hashem, who is a music student and a tuba player, and he actually returned recently from training with the National Guard's band. So that's a nice little opportunity that he had and took. And he talks about sort of in the article how he was persuaded to do it due to the benefits of, paying for college. And I don't know many other students who are here that have, sort of taken that, step to actually go and train with any branch of military and the band, and then coming back and then sort of continuing to be a student, obviously, and be engaged in the classroom and stuff like that. I think it's just really interesting to see what students do off campus and sort of how that plays into their desired career and things like that. So it was a really nice profile, and so we also had really good photos from our staffer Janet, so shout out. But yeah.
And I think it was so great to finally get this story. I know that we were trying to get it for, I think, 2 weeks to actually cover it. And I know that Haley was very excited to finally get coverage for it. But it's just such an interesting story to tell. And it's a very unique one as well. We've covered it in the last few weeks, but it's just so, it's fascinating to see these different stories from students on campus who just have these really interesting aspects of their lives that you wouldn't know otherwise. And it just shows how much is actually going on that you might not be aware of. And it was a very fun read, I'd say, a very different one.
And that's not like a small thing to get into. Military bands specifically, that's something that if you get into one of those, you're doing something right in some sense. And I mean, I've been covering arts and entertainment for a number of years now. One of the things that I'm always hearing from the music professors, and they'll love to tell you this, is a lot of them consider Keene to be almost one of New England's unofficial conservatories in a sense. So it just kind of goes to show, we are definitely doing something right on the music front. And kind of not surprised that we're having people that are kind of making these sort of advancements.
Yeah, it's good to see students across from all areas of campus have that motivating factor and to get out there in the broader community in sort of whatever way that they can, and sort of seeing that connected to this student's obvious, passion for playing tuba also is a really cool thing to see. So we'll try to keep on going with those really cool student profiles in the next few papers. Always on the lookout for interesting folks here on campus. But we're going to leave off here with the sports top story, which was coverage of the DeMar Marathon, which is a pretty big deal here in Keene. It happens every year, and it's in sort of memory of Clarence DeMar, who was a Olympian from Keene, who I believe was a former Keene State professor. I think he also founded the Keene State cross-country team, if I remember correctly. But it's a very big deal that a lot of anybody who's sort of, even in the remote area of Keene, who's a runner or likes running or sort of is really dedicated and passionate about that sort of thing, will likely either participate in the full marathon or the half marathon. And this happened the past Sunday as of recording. And it was just really good to sort of again, get some solid event coverage out of this. Talk to some folks who ran, talk to some folks who just assisted and helped out with the whole thing. And, things around campus also change when tomorrow comes up. They put out these like concrete barriers and stuff, and they got to get like the whole track ready. So a lot of hands and help goes into making sure that this can happen every year. But it's one of the bigger events in Keene, so we couldn't pass up the chance to cover it once again.
And I think it's a very heartfelt gesture to someone who came from Keene and who lived here. And it's just a good way for runners to honor someone who is a part of their field. And I think Keene in general just has a very rich history. We are very good at remembering things and to honoring people who came from here. I know the film Jumanji was a big part of all of that, but I think it's just nice to see. And it's an event that had a good coverage, had a good turnout, and just has a good reason to exist at its core.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of both the character of the school and the city itself. And I love those kind of events, whether it's something like this or the Pumpkin Fest or just any of these things that, we have so many events that are just like a once-a-year thing, and maybe they are here for a couple of years. But these are the kind of events that, like, if you go to this school and you graduate and then someday you bring your kids to show them where you went to college, you'll be able to say, oh, I remember when I was in college and this was going on. So it's kind of like a staple in that sense. That's what I like to see.
Definitely. And it was really cool to be able to, every year you hear a different thing from the folks that you interview who do it, and they do it for different reasons. And just to be able to have that sort of consistent tradition in a few different ways is really nice for Keene, I think, just broadly. But that does it for the recap this week. As always, I would like to extend a special shout out to the composer of the music for Noxcast, our very own Equinox alum, Zach Keenan, as well as the creator of the graphic for Noxcast, our very own art director, Elijah Fisher, and finally the editor for Noxcast as of now, our webmaster, Charlotte King. Until next time, I've been Nathan Hope. Thanks for watching.